name is Girish, Bali, the host for Back2Basics, another Back2Basics for another week. Today we're talking about smart devices and how it kind of helps us in many different ways. Some people, they think it's a bad thing and robotics and AI is taking over the world. But look at it this way. It's kind of helping us in certain ways. How to manage your health in a good way. And then explaining to all the doctors and physicians out there that this is what I have. And now the question is, are healthcare taking that information and helping you guys, or are they working against you? We're going to go and talk to a person. His name is George, and I met him a few weeks back, and we chit-chatted for the longest time, even though that the scheduled time was only 30 minutes. So he's a great person to chat with, collaborate with, and to get some insight when it comes to automation, when it comes to smart devices. So George, how are you? And thanks for coming to Back2Basics.
Thanks, Girish. Thanks for that intro. Excited to be here. I'm doing great. Excited to talk about this and try to look at different perspectives for your audience.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we talk to the details about your, smart devices and whatever you do and what do you think of what I have said earlier in the beginning, what does Back2Basic mean to you?
Yeah, so I think we discussed this last time. The idea that we go back to the fundamentals and back to basics resonates with me. Coming from sports, that was almost always the go-to thing. Like every time you, even as you progress with your skill set, you always want to go back and retrain, rehash the fundamentals. The fundamentals are always, relevant and are there to build on, so that you can keep accomplishing growth. But also, just understanding the fundamental things and tends to allow us to build upon and improve ourselves. So I think the Back2Basics mission resonates with me and what we're trying to do with the product.
Yeah. Thank you again, George, for explaining that. And I think you and I discussed this a few weeks back. And as I said earlier, the scheduled time was 30 minutes, but it went over. Because it seems like you and I connect in many different ways when it comes to automation, when it comes to smart devices, when it comes to what the future is going to look like. And we had a great discussion that day. So let me explain here. What are your thoughts on the question that I asked? Do you think physicians are working with you? When I say you, I mean the smart devices, or do you think that they're working against us?
I think the last couple of years, we've definitely seen a move towards physicians being much more open and looking at wearables and other kind of user-generated health data as a source of improved communication, improved outcomes, and improved empowerment on the part of the patient. I think we're seeing that for the physicians who are prescribing them, we're seeing there's several studies that show good results in the fact that, especially that a physicians have the power to get people to get behind the wearables more so than if the individual goes and self-selects that they wanted to start using wearables to self-monitor and personalize the health journey. If it's something that physicians educate and kind of lean towards, we found that it's actually leading to even more adherence and even more kind of building off of that data from the individual side, which ends up improving lifestyle-related outcomes. Meaning, so they're improving their activity, they're increasing their activity levels, they're improving their sleep levels, they're understanding what's going on with their body better, even from a behavioral health standpoint, understanding from a stress and recovery what's going on. So I think there's a big cohort, especially like a new wave of physicians who are behind it. We're already at a point where almost 1 in 4 Americans have a wearable. Obviously, the pandemic was a big push, created a new wave, but it was already happening from before. And physicians themselves are a part of that big push too.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. There's a reason why I asked this question is because, after your phone call, I was chit-chatting with a friend of mine and who is a doctor. And when I told him that there's variables that, smart devices that you can just tell a doctor that what your blood pressure is or what your heart rate is and whatever. And here's my report. Now, what he told me is that legally they cannot take that thing. Is it supposed to be helping you to day to get to the yearly checkup, or can we tell the doctor that, you know what, I'm working on this, I think you should lower my pill for whatever the, the report says? So what are your thoughts on that part?
So there's an interesting thing. When you go to the doctor's office, there's a famous kind of event called white coat effect. So you go to the doctor's office. Maybe you don't tend to measure your blood pressure. You go to the doctor's office, you're 142 over 80, which is elevated blood pressure. Let's just call it that. And that's, now you start thinking that you're going towards hypertension. But the reality is that if you were measuring your blood pressure at home, you'd probably be with an FDA medically approved device. You'd be in a normal range, which is in the 120s, 115s. So that's something where we're seeing that wearables and home smart health IoT devices are providing non-redundant support to the physician's journey. So they can be a source where they can understand what's going on in a person's real life. Because what happens is when a physician sees that a person is living a healthy lifestyle, but suppose somehow they have elevated blood pressure, now you have to go through doing a 24-hour blood pressure study. Now you have to go and start discovering after the fact whether this is true. Whereas we're in a position now where we have enough data where when a person comes in, they can empower the physician with the reality of what they're seeing happen in their day-to-day life, and the physician can understand where the problems might be. So yes, the patients, or let's not call them patients, people, right? We're not patients. They're not meant to self-diagnose and self-treat, but I believe it's a super powerful, non-redundant. I repeat, because I think it complements what physicians do to enable us to better care.
Yeah. So thank you again. This smart devices that we have, the watches and the ring, and then I think now there is something called a halo that you can sense your brain waves and your sleeping habits, right? So do you think that we're just going overboard, or do you think that we're actually learning day by day with new devices?
Well, being in the space, I think we're not even close to doing enough. I think there's so much that's happening in our body continuously in real time that we don't even understand yet. And I think we've innovated quite a bit. Like, what was it? 10 years ago, we had pedometers where we're just measuring our steps, right?
That's right.
We're at a point where we're identifying AFib passively in people who are just walking around. We're in a situation where understanding stress levels and associating it to how to improve behavioral health outcomes. So I think we're only scratching the surface of how well we can do. And I think, if anything, the indictment on the wearable technology is that it's not doing enough or not accurate enough. But I think that's a foregone conclusion, at least in my mind, that over the next decade, we're going to be in a much better place, higher data integrity, more data sources, much cheaper, so more accessible. And at the end of the day, what's more accessible and provides better outcomes than being able to have someone in a rural area have an affordable device that is giving them more information that they're getting in an annual exam. I think that's super powerful from an evolutionary perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you again. So, George, can we explain to people that what do you do and what your company does, and why are you so fascinated with smart devices and not just devices in general? So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so my team and I are ex-athletes, data scientists. So whether specifically for health data or just data science in general. And we've spent the last few years looking at the data coming from wearable devices, building models around that. So the same data that you're passively collecting today, possibly just using to understand how much you slept and how many steps you've done, we found ways to use that in ways that support our daily, like the whole notion of listen to your body, like these intuitive ideas of how we understand how well prepared we are for the day, how rested we are, how energetic we are. So we've modeled those out from your data in ways that empower you to really plan your day and find your optimal zones, right? So I'll give an example. Using just your sleep data and your activity data, we've modeled something that I think many people would be familiar with called circadian rhythm. So a circadian rhythm is a biological rhythm that's essential to, a vast majority of chronic health conditions. Like there's even cardiovascular, sleep deprivation, behavioral health, mental health, right? So understanding what your individual personalized rhythm is not only allows you to optimize around those preventive things towards your health, but also enables you to look at what time to have the most energy. You can go and work at that time. Like you can optimize your workout at the right time. You can do your deepest work at that time. So we're doing, what my team and I are doing is we're looking at wearable data that today, as powerful as the wearable devices are, most people don't know how to use that data. We're building things in a format that allows people to know and incorporate these things into their life. So yeah, and again, the thing that I'm really excited about is how much better these devices are going to be over the next decade, and how many more things we're going to be able to do to empower people in a way that, the cost of understanding these things today is probably in the hundreds of dollars. We can make these things be in the pennies moving into the future. So in 5 years, understanding from the moment you wake up to the moment you sleep what the optimal decisions are for your health are probably going to increase your health span and even your lifespan by a decade at least.
Yeah. So thank you again. And these devices do help us. It's not something against you. It's supposed to be guiding you as that you are in danger or you're in the safe zone. So some people, they have double thoughts when it comes to these smart devices. There are people like that, and which is totally fine. But there are certain people that they want to be part of this because it'll give you a lot of data. I guess too much of data is not enough. I think we need so much of data to help you to make that decision, whatever that decision is, at the end of the day. So thank you again for that. Now that do you think that we're preparing to get into the metaverse, or do you think that we're just preparing to understand what we are?
So metaverse, the metaverse is an interesting concept. I think we're definitely at the early days of what metaverse is, and it's still being defined what exactly the metaverse will be and how people will embrace it. And when I say non-early adopters, like the mainstream, but we're seeing even in healthcare opportunities for the metaverse to intervene. Right. Whether it's finding ways to make remote fitness like something that people find more, make it more social, make it more engaging. So again, breaking down barriers of access and breaking down barriers of just in real life. So I think the metaverse is definitely a good opportunity for many people, but for others, we're seeing that they're moving in the exact opposite direction. They wanted to spend more time outdoors. They want to stay away from devices. So I think we're getting into a point where there's just like many other things, just like with wearables, it's not a direction, it's not a singular direction that everyone needs to follow, but it is a direction that for some people, and we may or may not identify with them, it actually enhances their own human experience, enhances their own potential to be healthy, and it reduces costs and outcomes and improves outcomes for many people.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me ask you this. We've been talking a lot about smart devices, right? And we've just talked about the very little of metaverse. So are there variables in smart devices on the VR side of things?
There's a number. Actually, Apple recently acquired a company that has VR workouts. So clearly, that's a direction that when Apple acquires you, that's something where that this is like mainstream, and like this is something that's going to go more towards the mainstream. Obviously, you have Meta, Facebook basically acquired Oculus a few years ago. They're also looking a lot into the fitness side of things. We're seeing a number of especially fitness-related metaverse companies get a lot of good traction. I think to some extent, there's excitement around the fact that if you were doing a home workout, just watching a YouTube video that you can't engage. So think of this, like thinking of the old days of like home workouts. You're watching a VCR tape of like someone doing aerobics, right? Then we got to like the most recent thing, which was remote, having a live experience with watching someone in real time do the session. Now with wearables, you can actually have that same live experience where the instructor can see that George, who's actually in Los Angeles while the instructor is in New York, you can see that George is hitting his max heart rate. So the instructor can now engage in this remote, online scenario in a way with George that George feels the same experience as if he was in person.
Nice.
But the cost of this session is much lower because you don't have to do the real estate. You don't have to have the heavy equipment. Everyone can deal with their own equipment. The metaverse takes it to an even bigger level in that, people can engage in social experiences with their friends and work out in ways that otherwise, like, many people aren't interested in working out. You can make it fun. You can do like some exploration in space, and it can be like a running activity. So I think the opportunities are there to have, essentially we're having a bigger menu to pick from to improve outcomes and improve health and fitness.
Yeah. So thank you again. These IoT devices that we have at home, the automation devices that we have at home, right? And sometimes I feel, maybe there are other people feeling the same way, I'm not really sure, we're going a little too much when it comes to the home automation. Do you think these wearable devices are going too much also? Or do you think that we need to calm down and see what is good for us and what not? Or do you think we're just trying it out and see which passes and which fails?
I think the only ways that I could, again, from my perspective, the only way that I could see wearables going too far is to a point where either they're actually creating a negative, having a negative impact on you in some shape or form. So it could be some kind of, I know this is a concern with some people, electromagnetism or waves, like frequency waves that may be influencing your health in another way, like in a bad way. So possibly cancer-inducing electromagnetic waves. I don't have any evidence to suggest that that's a concern, but I know that certain people are concerned. Or something where we make where we stop looking at wearables as something that's accessible to the big part of the population and just building them so that only the elite can afford it. So I think as long as we're creating devices that aren't just so mobile phones, right? Like if we look back 15 years ago, mobile phones, we can't imagine not living with mobile phones today. And look at how they've revolutionized not just communication, like what do we not do? What do mobile phones not empower us to do today? They're opening up, even within health and wellness, actually, they've opened up the possibility for people to get like remote, mental health, remote sleep tracking, right? Just from phones. So now we're almost like creating this single new hardware device, this single new hardware category that is almost 80% focused on our health and wellness. So how much, I think, again, like, as I said, I think we're not even close to scratching the surface of what we could and should be doing with wearables, as long as they continue to be accessible and not harmful in some way.
George, you brought up a great point about the cell phones, and how they're really changed kind of the revolution of this whole world. A few days ago, I was speaking with someone and they actually said, these phones are not phones anymore. These are like small PCs that we are holding in our hands. I think phones or let's say text messages, those are all secondary now.
Yeah.
So I think we're changing the concept when it comes to cell phones, I think. I'm not really sure, but what are your thoughts on that part? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think I probably do 60% of my work from a phone.
That's right.
Or a smart device, basically. Texting is not even a thing anymore. It's like there's messaging. Messaging is multi-platform. Calling is not cellular calling anymore. 90% of it is VoIP. So generally, I think we're in a situation where these devices have both created harm in many people's eyes, in the sense that they've disengaged us from like in real life or like other types of experiences. They've obviously like blue light, and there's a number of other things that you can chastise them for. But I definitely think that they've opened up barriers. Like people are becoming they're making a living. It's enabled economic opportunity from a single device. They're cheaper than computers. They're more accessible, more transferable. They enable you to connect with the whole world from the most remote place in the world. They enable us to do a number of things that we weren't able to do before, that required offices, expensive equipment. So, by the way, I'm also working on another project where we're using smartphone cameras to run diagnostics. So enabling people to do home tests and just using the home camera. 5 years ago, this wasn't possible because the cameras weren't good enough to capture the faint lines on the test lines. But now they're so powerful, and like we're betting that they're going to continue to get more powerful. So now people can actually scan their tests, get super high quality, high integrity data at home, and they can do it repeatedly. They can do multiple times a week. And the increased frequency of testing and diagnostics enhances the likelihood of identifying conditions or preventing them to begin with.
Yeah. So thank you again, George. So let me ask you a question. It's a two question here. So if you had a choice between smart watches and, let's say, smart ring, which one would you prefer?
Yeah, interesting question. Can I add a third one?
Okay.
I would prefer implantables.
Okay.
And the reason is, so I think that's where we're going in terms of what the next step would be in terms of finding a better form factor for like tracking health. The reason being that smart watches and smart rings, they require some kind of social interpretation. So like, am I comfortable wearing a ring? Like, what color do I want it to be? Does it go with what I'm wearing? The same thing with watches. Do I want to wear this ring versus this watch versus something different? That's one variable. Then you have CGMs, which have been continuous glucose monitors, have been all the rage the last couple of years. They're amazing devices, but again, like, they're required to be put on your arm. It's not something that everyone wants to do. So there's limitations for physical things that you have to put on your body. The second thing is people forget to use them. So you might forget to use it, and now you have discontinued data. And then lastly, the batteries run out. And that's a huge thing too. So implantables also cover the idea that we're not focused on the device itself. Like, it's just tracking the data. We don't have the screen. We don't have the social utility of it. But the data integrity is sky high. It's long form. We don't have to concern ourselves with the fact that the person won't use it. So now you have a beautiful, like, continuous data stream that you can significantly improve the data models and really personalize and find a way to enable that person to live optimally.
So, and one more question: sunglasses or smart sunglasses?
I'll go with the smart route if I'm given that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, Ray-Ban is coming out with that smart glasses, right? People are liking it, and there are some people who don't like it, and some people that say, just stay away from me, and I just want to do my style. But I think with style, you come up with smartness, and I think that's what people were saying. So thank you again, George, for explaining that and telling us all the details, and definitely putting on your arm and getting data and more data, and how much data, that's just too much of data to handle. So George, before you leave today, do you have any last comments and last words to all my Back to Basic listeners and viewers? And how is your journey on Back to Basics too, on top of that?
So the one thing I would say is just to the point that you just made, that there's more and more data, right? And then this is where I'll bridge it back to the Back to Basics concept. So we want to increase data. We want to increase the quality of the data, the variety of the data, right? The integrity of the data. But humans aren't equipped to handle large amounts of data. So the whole idea with what my team and I are working on is, how do we continue to embrace this increasing availability of data in a way that doesn't overwhelm people, in a way that empowers them and makes them feel that they have utility for them. Because I think the dangerous part that we're getting into right now is that we're building these devices that have increasing potential, yet people don't really know what to do with it, and they're not really taking advantage of it. So it's this it's this bridge where we don't like, are people going to embrace are even more mainstream people going to embrace it? Because they're like, how do I actually put this thing in my life to make sense? So bringing it back to basic, it's like, okay, how do we continue to embrace this ever growing data environment in a way that communicates back to our monkey brain and our intuition? So that's the back to basics, takeaway from my end, is like, at the end of the day, that is the way you communicate to people. You take it back to the original way of thinking. You decomplex it, so you make it as simple as possible, straightforward, in a way that fits their life, and leave it up to the data science piece to like figure out how to represent that. But embracing data is not bad. It's just finding a way to communicate the data that's the challenging piece.
Wow, thank you again, George, for coming here, and thank you again for supporting me on this Back to Basic podcast that I have here, and thanks for supporting me on this small podcast, and it's great having you. I'll definitely chat with you offline with more and more picking questions and picking your brain on the smart devices. You have helped me on the other things that I've talked to you about offline, and it's been great collaborating with you.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you again.
Thank you, Girish.
Hi guys. So we spoke with George today, and we talked about the basics of smart devices, and is it helping us or is it making us worse? Is it making us more brighter with a lot of data? And what do we do with that data? These are the things that we talked about on this episode, and hopefully you guys will listen to this. Now, as usual, as always, there is a quote a day from Back to Basics, and hopefully my guest will like the quote. The quote is, "Learn from yesterday, live for today, hope for tomorrow. The important thing is not to stop questioning." These type of devices, they always makes us question one thing. Is this helping us? Is this making us worse? Is this the new place we need to look at? These are the type of questions we're asking. But as usual, as always, what do I always say at the end of the episode? Everything in life goes back to basics, and that's what we did today, guys. Guys, take care. God bless. Keep on commenting on all my episodes, because it does help me in many, many different ways while learning from you guys. And as usual, as always, there is 3 things in every episode, including today, makes this strong and successful for me, which is the content, the guest, and definitely the host. Guys, take care, God bless, and I'll see you next week on Back to Basics. Next week's episode on Back to Basics. The next 5 years is looking. I mean, I think we've done so much and learning so much out of this whole technology stuff, and that's everyone to decide if it is a good thing or a bad thing, but that's more of a new pivot over to a new idea. So what are your thoughts on the next 5 years, you think?
Personally, I think we're headed into, or maybe already have started into, the technology hangover. And I'm a technophile. I love technology. I always have, since I was a kid. But it's all too much, right? And